Hey guys, my name's Isaac and today I'm going to be walking you through my Sony FX3 A-cam rig. I love shooting fitness videos and also find myself shooting a lot of corporate content, so things like testimonials and promo videos for YouTube. So that's what this rig is built for. It's for me to jump into a situation and get as many shots as I can relatively quickly and feel very confident in the results I've got and get results in record time. So it's not the smallest, lightest setup. So if you're wanting something like that, that's when if I was traveling with my wife, I'd sort of go more like a 10-24 lens on my Fuji X-T4, and that's super small and light and compact, and we can take it with us when we're traveling. This is not that. This is a much bigger rig that allows me to do everything I need to do to sort of do corporate videography or jump into a gym and feel confident in what I'm shooting. So let me walk you through it. For my A camera setup, I use the Smallrig full cage. On my B camera setup, which is also a Sony FX3, I use the XLR module. So I use the Smallrig half cage because it doesn't block the XLR module that comes with the camera. For my A cam though, I'd much prefer having a solid NATO mount for my external monitor. So that's what I use on this, and I never need more than 2-channel audio, so this works perfectly. So my favorite things about the cage is that I've got this super solid top mount that has a NATO rail on it, which allows me to mount my external monitor. And I've also got a 15mm rod thread here, which allows me to mount my follow focus. Now I only use the follow focus if I'm shooting with a manual lens, like one of my Sirui anamorphics. So it's not all the time I'm doing that. Most of the time I do use autofocus, but on the occasions when I do use that, it's really handy to have this mount here. And when I'm not using that, it doesn't get in the way at all. By far my favorite thing of the cage though is the bottom mount. So the body itself only has a single thread in the bottom of it, which means if I mount a Manfrotto plate to it, I'll find that it'll start moving over time as it comes loose. So I'll mount it onto a tripod, but there'll still be a bit of play there. By using the cage and having 2 screws mounting the plate to the cage, I find that there's no way this camera moves ever. Once you bolt it into a tripod or your rig, it just doesn't move. And it sounds like the smallest thing, but I love it so much that it's so solid and doesn't move at all. The bottom half of my rig is mainly Manfrotto and Smallrig with a little bit of Nicey rig. So I've got a Manfrotto 501 receiver plate here, which is what's bolted to the bottom of the cage, so that way the camera can fit in here. Under that, I've got a Nicey rig dual 15mm rod plate. I like this over the Smallrig ones because it's much thinner. So as you can see here, it's quite a thin design. The Smallrig one just seems a little bit thicker and it's multiple pieces, whereas this is all one piece, so this just feels more secure. On the bottom of that, I've got a Manfrotto 501 long plate. And again, I've got the 2 threads in there, which makes it feel much more secure than a single thread. On the back here, I've got this Smallrig piece, and what it actually does is it threads into these 15mm rods for a really secure connection, and then gives you this articulating bit here, which is a plate you can mount stuff to. So what I've mounted to that is a V-mount plate. This is just the Smallrig tiny V-mount plate. There's no electrical connections or anything. It literally just holds the battery. And on the other side, I've mounted a NATO rail receiver piece. So this allows me to put other accessories on the other side. If they're small and thin, they can wedge in between the camera and the battery. Because I often use the Rode Wireless Go receivers, I put a cold shoe mount here on the left side rail. This is nice and close to the audio input for the FX3, so it allows me to put the receiver here and run the audio cable into the audio input on the body itself, and it just doesn't get in the way at all. It tucks in there nice and tight, and it's not in the way of the lens or the camera or anything, and it just works really well for me. Now to attach them together. I've actually got the Manfrotto plate on backwards, which is also how a lot of the Zhiyun gimbals work with the Manfrotto plate. This allows me to slide the plate in this way, and then the camera can mount perfectly fine. And it doesn't need to try and get past this piece, which can actually block it if you're trying to slide in from the other way. Once the camera's on the body, we're going to put the front handle on. So this is just a 15mm dual rods, and it goes in like so. And once that's on there, I'm going to tighten it up. And from here, I'm going to put these threads on at the front. Now, I didn't actually know why these were required at first, but one of my friends explained it to me, saying if you were to put these on, if then this mount came loose, instead of this just flying off the end of the camera, these screws would actually stop it from sliding off, which is especially important if you were walking around just carrying it from this one handle, say as you're walking between sets on location. So I feel like these are definitely required. Next up is the lens. So the lens I find myself using the most is the 24-105 f4 OSS. The two favorite things I love about this lens the most is, one is the focal length. So 24 is wide enough for pretty much everything I'm shooting. And on the other end, I can zoom into 105, which really allows me to get some close details or get some really good compression between the subject and the background at 105 mils, which is noticeably different from 70 mils. My other favorite thing is the OSS, which is the image stabilization. The camera does a great job of it, but I find with this lens, everything looks smoother than when I'm shooting with primes that don't have OSS, even though the camera itself has in-body image stabilization. So that's my two favorite things about this. I know I can't stop down to f2.8, but I find I don't need that for a low light situation as the high ISO performance is so good. And I also don't need it for background separation, because if I just take a step back and zoom in, I can get a really nice background blur, even though it's only an f4 lens. Now that I've mounted the lens, I'll find that the body is very front heavy because of all this weight on the front and not much weight on the back. That's not a problem for some people, but I find for me to get the most smooth movement, I really want the camera to be balanced in the center. So what I've done is I've mounted a V-mount battery to the back. So this is the Core SXW Nano Micro, which is a 98 watt-hour battery. And I'm just gonna mount that to the plate on the back here. Now that I've mounted the V-mount battery to the back, it feels perfectly balanced. So I've got approximate weight here, roughly matching the weight here on the back. I can also regulate this a bit by unscrewing the Manfrotto mount and sliding the camera forward or back slightly in the plate until it feels fully balanced. I'll know I'm fully balanced when I can hold the camera in one hand and there's no sort of weight pulling it down or pulling it back like that. It might sound like I'm nitpicking, but it really helps. I find when I'm filming and the camera feels balanced front to back, it's so much easier to shoot. My original rigs before I had the V-mount battery and I had the monitor on top, and it would always sort of lean forward, and I didn't realize how annoying it was until I had a fully balanced camera rig. And now that I've done that, I definitely can't go back. So I'd highly recommend having some kind of weight on the back, whether it's a V-mount battery or something else, just so you've got that balanced front to back rig. Next up is the external monitor. So whenever I'm shooting any paid client work, I make sure I always have an external monitor attached. When I've got the big 7-inch monitor on top, I can feel very confident that it's in focus, that the framing and composition are good, the exposure's great, and I've got all the tools there to help me out as well. And it also makes the client more confident. If they see a beautiful picture on this 7-inch monitor on top, they feel confident in what I'm doing. If I've just got this little monitor on the back, which is fine if I was just doing a little run and gun thing or something, I find I can't trust the image and I don't know if what I'm doing is going to look great in post. Whereas with the external monitor, I know exactly how it's going to look as I'm shooting it, which really helps me to feel confident and make the clients confident as well. The monitor I use is a SmallHD 702 Touch. So I've got it mounted to this Smallrig handle here, and then I've got this tiltable mount on the front here. This is something I learned from Monkey Pixels. He had the monitor mounted on the front there, so I tried it out as well and absolutely love it. What I really don't like is if I had to have the monitor mounted up here and then it ends up getting so high above the rig. I don't want that. I want it to be sort of as close to the camera and on the axis of the lens as possible. That just feels right to me, so that's how I do it. So this mounts with a NATO rail, and then I make sure that it lines up with the cold shoe. And so this means that it's right on the axis of the lens, which isn't a technical requirement, but just feels right to me. And then from here, there's two cables to plug in. So there's the full-size HDMI, which plugs in here. And then we've got the DTAP port, which plugs into the battery here. Another important part of my kit is my filter set. So I've got 3, 4, and 5 stop ND filters, as well as a couple of glow mist filters, which are like Black Pro Mist 1/8 strength. And I've also got a streak filter, which does sort of fake anamorphic lens flares, which I don't use much, but I keep in my kit. My favorite thing about this filter kit is that it's super simple to add the filters. So they just clip on with magnets like that. So you can just pop it on front. We're done. I don't have to thread it in or unthread it like that. And if I was to swap lenses, I can pull this lens off, take the filter off, pop the new lens on, and then pop the new filter on that simply. There's no threading or anything like that. I've got a few different E-mount lenses, so I've made sure they all have the 77mm step-up ring and magnetic front cover. So this means that when I'm on location, I can just pull the lens out and pull the filter off the existing lens and pop it on a new lens right away, and we're good to go. I don't have to worry about step-up rings or anything else on location, so it really helps minimize downtime when I'm changing lenses. Another favorite accessory of mine is the Smallrig Mini Matte Box. So I love this because it's super easy to mount onto the camera and it's not too big, so it feels balanced on camera. It's not front heavy or anything like that. Now my favorite things about this is one, it allows me to block stray light. So often I love getting some lens flare in camera, especially when I'm shooting anamorphic, but sometimes it's a bit overboard. So having this on top where I can just block in stray light that would otherwise hit the sensor is really helpful. Another thing I like about it is that it just gives me visual balance on the camera. Without the matte box, it sounds weird and I feel like a douche even saying it, but I feel like the body looks much more visually balanced with the matte box on the front. The third reason I got it is because I want to start experimenting with some other filters like a TIFF and glimmer glass, which I've never even seen in real life yet, but I want to get one of those soon. And most of those are available in 4 by 5.65 filters, so I'd need a matte box on the front so I can slide those in. I love this matte box, it feels great quality. It was super cheap to buy brand new from the Smallrig site. I'd highly recommend it if you are looking for a matte box. I've got no problem with it at all. Another super handy accessory that I don't use all the time, but really helps out when I do use it, is this. This is the FXLion Nano HUB. So what this does is it takes a D-tap input and then gives you a range of different outputs. So you can see on here, I've got a barrel output for 7.2 volts, a barrel output for 12 volts, they're both fully regulated, as well as a USB-A and a USB-C port and a D-tap port. So the main reason I got this is because the USB-C port is USB-C PD, so it can deliver a different range of voltages up to 60 watts. The reason why that's so cool is because I can power the camera itself from this V-mount battery using this adapter. If you were just to power it with a USB-A cable, it's just going to trickle charge it. It's not enough power to fully power the camera, so the battery will still go down just a little bit slower as it's only providing less than 5 watts at a time. By using this, I then plug it into the V-mount battery, and now the camera can draw as much power as it wants, so the battery life will just stay at 100% for hours and hours. The reason why I chose this over a dummy battery is because with a dummy battery, if it was to lose power, say when the battery runs out of juice, the camera just turns off and doesn't finish writing the file. So it means you've actually lost whatever you were recording at the time, which terrifies me, because if I was doing a 1-hour shoot and then 58 minutes in, the camera just turned off and lost all the footage, I'd be devastated. By using this, we're using the camera's internal battery to power the camera and fully charging it as fast as we can using this, so it stays at 100%. But if this battery does run out, it'll just cut over to the internal battery, and when that gets low, the camera's just going to gently turn off after finishing saving the file, so you're not going to lose anything. So I much prefer that. I've also heard some stories of dummy batteries destroying cameras with wrong voltages and stuff like that. I've only heard a few stories of that, so I'm not saying it happens all the time, but it was enough to make me scared. I feel much safer using this, where I'm just providing a USB-C input rather than a dummy battery. The way I connect this to the camera is using a NATO rail. So I've mounted a NATO rail on this battery adapter itself, and then I've got a NATO receiver on the cage. So from here, I just slide that in whenever I need to use it. And once that's mounted, I can plug it into the battery here. And then I've got a USB-C port right here that can plug into the camera here. So a really nice short cable run. From there, I've got the full power of this battery powering the camera. So I can pretty much get all day battery life from this one rig. Another accessory that I only use when I'm shooting on anamorphics, which are manual focus lenses, is this Smallrig follow focus here. So what this allows me to do, it allows me to hold the camera using this handle while also adjusting the focus using this follow focus system here. Now I love this for a couple of reasons. The main reason is that it allows me to adjust the focus of the camera without upsetting the balance of the camera. If I'm doing this and then turning like this, I just feel this shaky motion that I try and not get into the camera, but it just goes in. As I'm focusing, you can feel the camera movement. By using this, there's definitely no camera movement because I'm just doing this, so the lens is adjusting focus without ever shaking the camera around. Another thing I like about it is occasionally I'll get confused. This sounds really dumb. Because I shoot Fuji and Sony and Canon, sometimes I get confused about which way focus is further away and which way focus is closer. By using this, because I always have it mounted the correct way, I know if I pull it towards me, it's definitely bringing the focus closer to me. And as I push it away, it's moving the focus further away. So I don't often get confused, but just occasionally I'll ruin a shot by focusing the wrong way because I'm just not thinking. So this prevents me from that, but my main favorite thing about it is just the fact the camera stays stable as I adjust the focus. Just to show you how I use this, there's a few different ways I use the camera. Sometimes I'll have it away from my body, say if I'm trying to get low shots where I'll just hold it by itself. Having those 2 points of contact, as well as my forearm resting up against the battery there, really allows it to be pretty smooth, especially with the OSS and the IBIS of the camera itself. Another way I'll use it is to put the back of the battery against my tummy. This I feel gives me really smooth footage. So as I move around, my body is moving the camera rather than just my arms. This really gives me super stable footage. Another way that I learned from my friend Daniel is to shove this into my side. So it's sort of between my pec and my shoulder. And I'm sort of squeezing the battery in there. This allows the camera to come closer to my body. So if we're in a tight space, it allows me to back up a little bit more. And I also find I can get really smooth shots like that. The only downside of this is with my current monitor mount, the monitor's not facing me directly. It's sort of shooting past me a bit, but that's fine. It's such a big bright monitor. I can still see what's going on just fine. And that still allows me super smooth footage. As well, because we've got the top handle, I can often do low grip. And even because it's so well balanced, it doesn't move much. I can just sort of pan forward and back super easy without a problem. I used to find with other top handles, before I had the battery on there, the camera would just tilt forward. And so you then have to grab it. And then because you're grabbing it, it's not perfectly balanced and you're introducing some sort of shake there rather than just gliding through the air. So that's the main ways I'll use this rig. Thanks for watching, guys. If you've got any questions about anything I've shown you on this rig, or if you've got any suggestions or feedback, I'd love to hear it in the comments below. I'll make another video soon about my B camera setup, which is another Sony FX3. It's sometimes in gimbal mode, sometimes on a tripod, and it's sometimes a super discreet handheld setup, and sometimes even a webcam. So it's a very small, light setup, which I'll walk you through in a separate video. Thanks for watching. I'd love to hear from you, and see you in the next one.